Our dearly beloved vinyl records have been stimulating listeners and collectors since the 1800s. Last year in the United States alone, vinyl sales were over 1,000% higher than a decade prior. How did this sexy little piece of plastic come to be, and how has it evolved over the ages? Sit back and relax. We're about to take you for a spin.
When vinyl was the only format, the record came out and it sounded like what it sounded like.
Vinyl is the thing that we sell the most of, and it's how we stay in business. And
what I would say of vinyl is you get this great moment in time that the artist wanted to present to you.
I think that people enjoy vinyl because they enjoy a tangible product.
Some kids grew up in a vinyl home, and so they got a turntable and they're stealing their parents' records. There's other kids that had no connection to it whatsoever. And so to them, it's a brand new thing. It's like a new technology.
All ages, any age, loves the feeling of coming to a record store, browsing through the records.
Because it's not just side A and side B, it's the sequence of the song.
I like to be able to pick up a record.
Dudes come in with gray hair and they go, "You're playing that on vinyl?" I used to have that record. People who like to tell you that they used to have that record.
I remember having a single by this fella called Hawk Wind, something called Silver Machine, and I thought, what a strange name for a bloke.
Boom! You drop down the records, you just won. You know?
Genesis Seconds Out, and I was off school. I thought, well, I'll borrow that and give it a listen. And it was Supper's Ready. I put the wrong side on, I didn't put side 1 on, I put side 3 on or something, which is the whole of Supper, and that was only the second Genesis Seconds. I thought, my God.
Anyone would just love to come into a record store.
The appeal of it is the records, that it's a good size. It's like it fits in your hands.
Something special about it.
If Spotify goes away, if there's the big electronic blip and all your MP3s get burned out, or how many people have lost hard drives of all their MP3s over the years, a record's something that sits around forever.
Everything you watch on television, there's always a record player.
Like when vinyl was coming back, I could tell because all of a sudden you would see it in TV shows and in commercials.
I swear, every show, every movie now that's been made in the last 5-6 years.
Hey, it's cool, they're listening to records.
Emil Berliner launched the first 78 gramophone record in 1889. The first vinyl discs were made for playback at 33 1/3 RPM and pressed onto 12-inch diameter flexible plastic discs. These, however, were a commercial flop due to consumer hesitance during the Great Depression. However, in 1939, Columbia Records expanded the realms of vinyl technology, and in 1948, Columbia introduced a 12-inch long-play 33 RPM microgroove record, aka the birth of the LP.
I mean, I guess there's two things. There's the listening experience, which I've compared to, it's more like watching a film, where I think digital audio is more like watching reality TV.
I'll give you an example, like just looking through like this box of records and seeing a Bruce Springsteen record, a Steely Dan record.
I bought, I think it was Bon Jovi. I bought a 45. My mom let me buy a 45 at a record store.
You like start to think about that song. You start to think when that song came out. When was the first time you heard that song? And it just brings back emotions and memories, and that's what's really special about music in general.
Vinyl, when it was first created, you could listen to a band at home. You didn't have to go out to some place to see musicians play to hear a song or listen to it on the radio. You could actually listen to the actual songs of the actual people you wanted to hear at any time.
But when you listen to a vinyl record, it's like sitting down and watching like a foreign film with subtitles, where if you enjoy that thing, you have to really pay attention to it.
I like the experience. I love the experience of dropping the needle on the record and having to go back and, okay, the record's done. Got to flip it over, clean it. It's sort of more of a ritual thing.
And then you get up and you flip the record. It's kind of like a little intermission, and you listen to it like the artist intended.
It was Columbia Records engineer Peter Carl Goldmark who first set out with his team of engineers in 1939 to evolve the 78 RPM record and move forward to 33 1/3 RPM, extend playback time to more than 20 minutes per side, and shrink vinyl grooves down to an accessible, acceptable millimeter size. This stroke of genius changed music forever, and the rest, as they say, is history.
When you put on a record, you are putting on a specific artist.
There is a thrill when you buy that record, but the record, when it arrives for me, sometimes my hands are shaking.
With vinyl, there is something, it goes deeper than just nostalgia.
I can't wait to get back to my parents' house and take their copy of Are You Experienced, the Jimi Hendrix record, because there's a specific skip in one of the songs that I can't hear the song without that skip. And I need that copy because I'll never be able to hear the song right again unless I get that. And that's another thing I love about vinyl.
And then you have all the cool bonus stuff. You've got giant liner notes and big artwork. And it's just so much more engaging than listening to digital streaming.
You know that $15, $20, $25 you're spending at the merch table, or buying off of Bandcamp, or buying at a local record store, is supporting somebody within your community.
I don't really care whether the record is beat up or has scratches on them. I have the memory of finding it, and that memory stays with me whenever I see that record, you know? So
it's like Rumors, Fleetwood Mac. It's been like 10 years. We sell it probably more than anything else. And, just when you think like, there's no way anyone else in the world could need that record, I'll look and we're almost out of it. And I have to order like a ton more. And
no one really cared about CDs. CDs were cool because you could put a bunch in an envelope and take them in your car, and they were portable. But there was nothing sexy about them. Like no one's excited about the 3,000 CDs they have on a rack in their living room. No one cares about that.
No matter how expensive it is, I might be able to buy that album for £2 on a CD. I'm not interested, I just want the real deal.
Experience of seeing someone play vinyl gets people to talk about it, gets people to come up to me and say, I have that record, or I used to have that, or do you have this version of that record? Oh, the German pressing is so much better than this, or like it can bring up so much conversation.
You don't have to go far to find a record store. In all four corners of the world, coast to coast, high and low, there's always a little place you can find that will deliver the goods. Just like this one in Lincoln Park, Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Dave Crane. I'm the owner of Dave's Records at 2604 North Clark in Chicago. We're in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, about a mile and a half south of Wrigley Field. You can come in and shop, but we're just in the middle of doing an interview.
Yeah.
You don't have to go away. Okay. Some people don't want to be on camera. I got into the record store business 35 years ago. I got a job at a chain store called Musicland, which no longer exists, back when records were actually still the top format. The first day on the job, I unboxed about 500 copies of Michael Jackson Thriller. I kept cutting open the box and go, more Thriller? More Thriller? More Thriller? So there I found an ad in the paper for a job at this chain, which used to be called Secondhand Tunes, and I worked for the original owner. He sold it to an internet company. They went bankrupt. Out of the bankruptcy in 2002, I bought the store, so I've owned it as Dave's Records for about 20 years, but I've been working here forever, for 35 years. I think the favorite part of the vinyl business is on any given day, I can have new information brought to me. A new record will come in, I've never seen it before. I'll pick it up and go, this looks more interesting than what I think. I don't know anything about this, and then you put it on and it's terrible. Or, oh my God, how do people not know about this record? So there's always more to learn with records. And, I think with records, it's like some things bring you back to, when you were a teenager. It brings you back to times in your life, and with music itself. The thing I love about it is it's a very emotional tie to the actual sound. You know, there are certain songs you hear that it's like, oh yeah, that was that party back. You know, so I think music itself, whether it's on vinyl or in any format, I think music itself is just such an emotional and important thing in all of our lives. Don't worry, you can just shop around us. We're just doing an interview. Ignore us.
Okay, good.
You're not mic'd. We won't put you on. We've been buying records for 35 years at this store. There's never been a time where it's like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? Where are records gonna come from? So I'm just at the point now where if people have stuff to sell, I mean, just before you came in, there was a guy that came in, and I got a stack of records here. He's going to come back later, and you know, that's how the used stuff comes in. The new stuff, we have probably 10 to 15 different distributors, small and large, that we go to get the new stuff that's coming out. So we have a good mix of both new and used. The thing about the used stuff is you never know what's coming in. Sometimes you get a great collection, but it also goes out super fast because, like nowadays, most kids come in and they look through our rock section, and you know, it's predominantly new stuff because the used stuff comes in and sells so fast. It's like, how come there's not like this huge stash of really cheap Led Zeppelin records? Well, it's like, because the minute they come in, they go right back out the door.
This record store in Chicago is just one of thousands and thousands of independent vinyl merchants all over the world. Music stores have become something of a pilgrimage for music fans, travelers, DJs, window shoppers, and vinyl fanatics of all ages. For so many, the grassroots independent record stores are the lifeblood of the LP industry. And we've gone to check some of them out.
Hi, my name's Sharon. I'm from here, New York City, and I own a record store. It's a family-owned business. We've been open for almost 50 years. My parents started it in 1975. They came here as immigrants and opened up a music store. The store was a regular electronic store in the 70s in New York, and if you're familiar with that time, there was many electronic stores on 7th Avenue. We were on 7th Avenue at the time, and we kept records in the back. So my dad started it, and then once he saw that he can actually support a family, he had my mom come from Israel with my sisters, and everyone moved over here, and my mom ran the record department, my dad ran the electronics department, and then it became a record store. So what happened I'd say it evolved in the 80s, late 80s to early 90s. I've been doing this, I probably took over in around the 2000s, 2005, until now, and then my parents had it up until then. We put records every corner we can fit it in this store. Gotta maximize the space, I suppose. We're the #1 DJ store in the world. People come from all over, and I'm happy to say we were able to outlast and to stay a record store through all of this and through all these times. And we're carrying more records now than we did 10 or 15 years ago even. So it's cool to keep vinyl alive, at least for us. We evolved with the times when we had to evolve with the times. That's really the only way. And we tried to do it being authentic to who we are. And that's what makes us so unique in this day and age, to have a store like this in the heart of New York City. My favorite part is really doing stuff for the community. Getting to know the customers, talking to like everyone who comes in, it feels like they know us and they have a good feeling. And also, the best part is they're doing something for something they love. Like, we're selling them music, and they're playing music for people, and they're playing music for themselves because they just, music, you feel something with music, and that's my favorite part of the job. I love records. I listen to them here, but I live in an apartment in New York City, so I don't have that many at home. Space, you know.
Rock and Soul Records in New York City is one of the largest DJ record stores in the country, and the term disc jockey is still strongly associated with the vinyl record. Almost a century has gone by since the inception of vinyl, and with buzzwords like retro and vintage, the format owns the fact that it is, by design, inherently old school. But that didn't matter because vinyl was cool. DJs have spun vinyl for decades, and they will be forever known as the ones that made vinyl look good.
I have been a DJ for over a decade. I think I started in probably 2008 or 2009, somewhere there. My interest in vinyl started, actually I must have been a little bit older, maybe 4, but whatever kindergarten age is, I should know that. But it was that and reel-to-reel tape were probably the only mediums. But my parents had vinyl. I couldn't get into kindergarten where I was. It was too full. I was living in the sticks in southern Ohio. Family lived on a farm. So basically my parents would babysit me by plopping me down in front of the record player. I would pick out records and they would just play them. And I have very vivid memories of the record, what it looked like, the sleeve. When I started DJing, that's when my record collection expanded from about 500 records to about 2,500, 3,000 records. Because I would always look for new stuff, because I never really wanted to spin the same thing over and over, and especially for the bartenders, because I didn't want bartenders to get bored. My favorite part about DJing is getting to look through my thousands of records. Because every time I go to a shift, I will spend a large part of the day flipping through all of my records and thinking about how I would like the evening to go. Sometimes whatever is happening during the day will inspire me. I'll hear a song and I'll go, wow, I really want to play that song. And I have Spotify, I have other streaming services I can't remember, but and I use those regularly. But I like to, especially in the morning, put a record on. It's also so that I can let my daughter know that this is here and this is a good way to listen to music. One of my favorite vinyl records is Fela Kuti and Ginger Baker live. Especially for DJing, that record is great because you drop the needle and you can go hang out and get a drink and use the bathroom. It's always essential to have a bathroom record, but that one is great because you can take your time, because you can let it go the entire album side. And then flip it over and play the other if you really got to hang out with someone. But it's great. It's just kind of all groove, bass and drums predominantly, and it's just such a great record. Well, I think that people are nostalgic for vinyl because it's just how music was heard, and we've all heard that it's a great way to listen to music. So I would always, on my way to this one bar I would DJ, I would go and I would stop at Goodwill here in Oakland, San Pablo Ave. That became my favorite record store because I found easily over 1,000 records at that Goodwill. So I look for everything.
With every medium, we always have to ask ourselves, why do we love it so much? How did it steal our hearts and our ears? For nearly 100 years, vinyl lovers, home stereo enthusiasts, 78 collectors of all walks of life have made space that they didn't even have to store these magical discs that trigger our emotional nostalgia so poignantly. Of course, you can get all philosophical about it, but the real question is simple. Does vinyl really sound better?
This is kind of controversial, but people will say that vinyl sounds better. It may be true. It just depends on your needle, it depends on your speakers, depends on your turntable. It's not just the vinyl that sounds better. Some vinyl doesn't sound good at all because it's not played on a good system.
Crunchy poppy is the wear and tear on the record. So like when it's been played a lot and there've been needles and there's wear and tear on a record, it's going to have surface noise.
If you play a record a lot of times, even if you have like a really nice record, a really nice needle and a nice turntable and all that kind of stuff, it's going to wear out. It's something touching something else. And
we kind of take it for granted, but a lot of these things, it's unbelievable how they came up with it and how it started.
You know, a lot of people will ask what does make vinyl sound better than digital, and I always still come back to the sense that it's 100% sonic. I can take a record right now, drop that needle on it in a quiet room like this. I don't even have to turn on the amplifier. You're going to be able to hear something, right? It's actually physical. There's a needle rubbing over a bump that is creating that electronic impulse that then sends it down the tone arm and back to the tuner and into your speakers. It's actually making that sound. It's not just zeros and ones on a file. So there's the warmth everybody talks about in vinyl is the sense that it's actually its own instrument in many ways. So that's the biggest differentiation between digital and analog, in my opinion.
I think vinyl sounds great because you have a physical thing sitting on a physical thing with another physical thing. Like there's all these parts, moving parts, yeah. I guess it depends on what era you're looking at. A lot of times music is produced for vinyl, and sometimes it's produced for streaming, and then it's pressed to vinyl. So sometimes vinyl doesn't sound any better than the streaming service.
We do a lot of comparisons of like original pressings versus maybe a reissue on new vinyl. And for the most part, they're either pretty close to the same or better. Very rarely are they horrific. Occasionally that's happened on a couple of reissues of things. But for the most part, what we've compared, and that's one of our favorite things to do, is to compare a original copy with a reissue, especially of 90s music, because 90s records are hard to come by, the original ones. And it's people like to think that the new vinyl isn't as good, but really it's usually the same or better.
Some vinyl sounds great because that's how it was intended to be heard. It was, like I said, it was recorded and produced and mixed with the vinyl experience in mind.
There's definitely a lot of vinyl that I believe is made just to satisfy customer demand. Vinyl where it's sort of a vinyl product that's sort of an afterthought because a label decided they needed to do a vinyl version. So those are records where maybe they mastered the album for CD and digital, and then they end up using the same exact master to cut the records, which is surprisingly common in this industry. And sometimes those records can sound really good.
From my experience, the cut, how a record is cut is really important.
What you're going to hear about today is nothing short of a miracle. It's dramatically new, made possible only through years of research, inventions, and innovations. Living stereo, played on a record. Through the all-new 2-in-1 RCA Victor stereo orthophonic high-fidelity Victrola.
Vinyl is actually short for polyvinyl chloride, PVC.
So when we say cutting a record, we're mastering first generation to make a vinyl record. So we're actually cutting the music into an aluminum plate covered with nitrocellulose lacquer that is used essentially, to simplify it, it's used as the form for the pressing of the production records.
So what happens when you come out of a studio, you have your raw mix, then they mix it, and then it goes to a mastering guy, right?
A band and producer would go in the studio, they would work on mixes, they would send those mixes to the mastering engineer who would cut reference acetates, and then if the producer and the band wasn't happy with the way that reference record sounded, they would go back and make mix changes to get it to sound right on the medium.
There's a differentiator because sometimes people will come to us and say, hey, I've had it mastered, do I need to have it mastered for vinyl? Well, yes.
Full-length LPs that play at 33 1/3, and then there are 12-inch 45 like singles or maxi singles. And
LP, 12-inch, 7-inch.
There definitely has to be different levels set on how it translates into cutting the groove on vinyl.
You're covering, what is it, like 29.7 inches at 33 1/3, and I know someone out there will fact check this and yell at me. But when you get to the center, you're still moving at the same speed, but trying to fit that same amount of music in half the space, roughly. So that being said, like a 7-inch product will never sound as good as a 12-inch will cutting that same song on the outside of a record. So your audio quality decreases as you get towards the inside of the record. and that's just one of the physical limitations of vinyl. The distortion increases and the high frequency content dips down.
Have you ever seen the microscopic view of a groove?
I have.
Okay, so if you look at a microscopic photograph of a groove, it's a V cut. And one side's the left channel, one side's the right channel. There's little nubs all the way up and down, and the needle sits down in the middle of it.
There's only two ways a groove can move, and a groove is sort of shaped like a V. So a groove moves laterally and vertically.
So that's what a vinyl mastering guy needs to figure out, how, if the high end's gonna be able to go, if it ends up too high, it's not gonna be able to fit in the groove.
So the depth changes, which is what we call vertical movement, and lateral movement moves the groove side to side. So the way a vinyl record player decodes that movement into stereo is that you've got your lateral movement, which is what we call our mono movement, everything up the center, and the vertical movement, which changes the depth of the groove, is stereo information off to the side. So without getting into tons of detail, sometimes too much low frequency content on the sides can cause weird issues with the cut. But in general, the low frequency content causes the grooves to swing more, which takes up more space on a record.
Now let's take another look at our living stereo record groove with its two separate soundtrack impressions, one on each side. In cross-section, it looks like this, a V-shaped groove, 45 degrees on each side. Let's put our living stereo stylus in this groove. As the record turns, the right side of the groove reproduces the sound from the left-hand section of the orchestra. The left side of the groove reproduces the sound from the right-hand section. Now, both at once, two totally different soundtracks coming from one groove, on one record, with one stylus. This is living stereo.
Vinyl, on CD, probably streaming too. The vinyl, there was a certain point where the needle would jump off of a song. And it was, I don't know why, it was just a frequency. I think it was a bass frequency, really. And this is a fault of ours. Maybe we didn't pay enough attention to our test pressing. But either way, a good cut, your needle will stay on the record if the record is cut properly. And that's actually really essential because you don't want the needle jumping off.
I mean, we can control sound here to a certain level, and every pressing plant can, but you're only as good as your cut.
Mastering can at times be stressful because we're the last people in the chain to touch the product. We're not allowed to make mistakes. We're the ones they pay to not make any mistakes. So oftentimes, by the time the project gets to mastering, it's already weeks behind schedule. So there's a lot of pressure for us to get the job done.
They're the real geniuses behind making a record. Those guys, I always say that's where the magic happens.
In the 70s, RCA made these Dynaflex records, and I have Bowie records that are Dynaflex records, and they're supposed to, I think they were supposed to be more lightweight, but they're so thin that you can wobble them really easily, and I imagine they warp really easily too now. But the great thing about vinyl now is that no one is making Dynaflex or anything even remotely like that. It's all, high quality, 180 gram or up. So the records are really really well pressed and really nice vinyl, so they're gonna stay for a long time. But
I know some people just leave the records just like laying out, they just put it on on top of the speaker or on a table or something, and just even kind of shifting it around a little bit.
I've heard a lot of great music, but I got one of my biggest musical thrills visiting the Camden plant of RCA Victor. In that plant, guarded day and night behind these huge steel doors, I found a treasure house of music, the originals of the finest records ever made by Victor, the music of the world's greatest artists of past and present.
the process of making vinyl is tricky. I don't really have any experience with it. I have gone to a couple record presses. There's one here in Oakland, and the name is escaping me, but I know the process is a bunch of little vinyl pellets that they put into this thing, and it melts it, and they press it and that's about as technical as I can get.
You know, initially records, you know, like most inventions, they morph over time. You know, initial sound was on a cylinder, and the cylinder spun around. You know, they would put the grooves into a wax cylinder, and it would, you know, and it would play. And then eventually they found it was easier to press it to a flatter surface, which they, you know, they made 78s, old 78s, which, you know, they were thick and hard and breakable, and you could put one song on each side. There wasn't room for much.
The first step, I learned, is to pour a thin layer of molten wax onto a hot plate, the beginning of the master record. A hot flame melts all bubbles and flaws out of the wax, which is of the purest possible grade. This is done in a sealed, dust-proof and air-conditioned room where the temperature is thermostatically controlled.
My children, when they were growing up, I had an old 78 player, and a very simple way to show it is like with an old 78 player, it has a steel needle that fits into the groove, and what that does, there's a groove that's imprinted into the vinyl. The needle tracks that, and that creates a vibration which goes up and vibrates the speaker.
Meticulous examination ensures smooth perfection before the wax is passed through a special slot to the recording room. The perfect wax is put on the turntable, a cutting point called a stylus is adjusted, and everything is ready to record again the most popular selection ever caught on wax. The sound engineer is ready, the musicians are set, and I see a record made.
Welcome to Smash Plastic, come on in. What we do here is it starts out as PVC granulate, so small little pieces of PVC, either brand new or reground from previous jobs. We tend to use a mix. And that's melted within the machine, and at, you know, varying between 250, 280 degrees, it melts and creates a puck. That puck then will become the record. It goes into the press with two labels with it. It is secured with a center pin, and it comes together at 2200 PSI of pressure. What makes our plant unique, and we were the first one in the world to press with hot water rather than steam. So we have a thermal unit that gets hot water up to 280 degrees in a matter of seconds, and we run hot water through our molds rather than steam. It's a lot more environmentally friendly, it's a lot more energy efficient, and it's much easier than having a giant boiler room to maintain. You know, it was the first question a lot of people asked, like, oh, you're starting a fad business. You know, they're getting cool again, it's just a fad. I've been around music long enough to know that vinyl collectors have been here all along. And the one thing I kept saying to people was, as long as we don't overstep our bounds as far as how quickly we grow and become a huge plant or something like that, and then the bubble bursts. So I'll take you down here to the press. As we're just getting things started up for the day. So this is the press as it's getting prepped for the day, as we're beginning to start a job. This will be on in about 5 minutes. We're just warming it up now. Steve's getting it all ready.
Two totally different soundtracks coming from one groove, on one record with one stylus. This is living stereo. It means that stereophonic recording has been brought down from a relatively expensive hobby into the price and convenience range of the average family, giving them the tremendous musical experience of living stereo.
So this is when the records come off, they sit here for at least 12 hours, hopefully more like 24. They need to sit to cure, so they end up ensuring that they're flat. That's why you see a cooling plate between them all, one every 5 records. And that'll be getting them retail ready, going through the shrink wrapper and stickering on the back end. So a lot of our day is getting these things ready and packaged and out the door. We're actually kind of a byproduct of the resurgence, because previous to really about a year, well, previous to about the 5 years ago when we started investigating this, there were no new machines being produced. So if you wanted to start a pressing plant, you either had to purchase somebody else's plant, find old machines that haven't been used for, 10, 20 years that are going to be in bad shape. Then you have to find the engineer to be able to fix those machines, and a lot of those guys were aging at the time and hard to find. So that was kind of a non-starter for us. We investigated it for a very short period of time and realized that we had to start a company with a new press. We've been open for about 2 years. This whole idea and the whole thing started almost about 5 years ago. I've been part of a local community radio station here for the last 12 years. And so part of the being part of the local scene and knowing bands and things like that, I really realized that probably about 5 years ago, people were having a really hard time getting their vinyl made. They were waiting 6 months, they were having a lot of issues, and I knew there was nobody here in Chicago. So it started, me and another partner, my partner Matt and I who's also one of my best friends, we just started a conversation, and he was kind of like, well, let's figure this out. And that was literally 5 years ago, and then it became 2 partners later, and the 4 of us just kind of kept stair-stepping and trying to figure it out. But yeah, it started about 5 years ago. Up until we showed up as a pressing plant here in town 2 years ago, I think there were a lot of people that were kind of like, it's hard to get things done, and we have to go out of state, and we have to, if I have this crazy idea of like printing on the backside of a record, who do I talk to? Well, now people can walk into this room and actually physically talk to somebody before they begin their project. So we have a lot of labels and a lot of projects that wouldn't have existed if Smash Plastic hadn't opened their doors in Chicago, I think, and that's what we take the most pride in here. So I think those are kind of my favorite projects. It was important for us to be in this building because we wanted to have a vintage feel. We wanted to be in the city first place. We looked around all over the place, and we could have been in a collar suburb for way cheaper, and could have been in one of those, you know what I'm talking about, those warehouse buildings that would have been sterile, but it would have been a nice place to do production. This building is the former home of the Hammond Organ Company. So the Hammond organ was made here from the turn of last century all the way up until 1985. So it had this musical history. Our proximity to Avondale and Logan Square, where venues and bands live and play, and we just felt like we wanted to be very close. And so it was a no-brainer to be in a building like this. Now, we can take a client from walking in here saying, hey, I just walked out of the studio, what do I need to do, all the way to here's your retail-ready product. They don't know that all those other processes are done elsewhere. Some people come to us at different points in the process. They might say, hey, I've already had this mastered, I've already had this plated. Now, I always say my favorite part about the job is handing records to people or putting them in the back of their trunk or their car or whatever. And that's the beauty of us being here. Probably 85, 90% of our clients are picking them up right here, and we're wheeling them out to their car and placing them in their car. So we've eliminated one of the biggest variables that a point of contention for people doing vinyl is the shipping. That to me is one of the coolest things in the world. How many people get to sell a product and actually see their client get super excited about it? Half the time we can barely get bands out of here because they come in and they stay for like 2 hours. They just sit here and they want to talk about their projects and all that, but that's part of the job. So anyway, yeah, we built this bar because we wanted to have a place where people could come in and listen to their test pressings, have a place to hang out and listen to music. And that was what this room was all about, and it's just kind of evolved into a little bit of a fun space where now we've inherited all this other equipment, like a jukebox and a pinball machine from Bloodshot Records, and it's just, kind of a work in progress. But it was essential for us to have a space that can double as an office, a meeting area, and allow a place just to hang out. It's even our lunchroom.
sound is a strange thing. Everybody has two pair of ears. so you can get crazy audiophile, and there are guys that'll tell you that they can set up a system with CDs that, you know, with the right equipment and everything else, and it's going to blow you away. And it will, you know.
It's one of those things I sort of not understood. I mean, a CD sounds fine. Vinyl, I think, isn't it more of the taking the record out the sleeve, putting it on? You can read the sleeve, which you can't on a CD. You've no idea who wrote that song or whatever. Your magnifying glass isn't big enough.
A lot of people drank the Kool-Aid that vinyl just immediately sounds better. And I would question that. I don't know that that's actually accurate. It is true within a certain span of time. You know, prior to, I'd say 1955 or so, they didn't really know what they were doing yet. You know, so Bessie Smith recordings back in the day, they sounded pretty rough. Once they actually figured out how to master vinyl, now they sound pretty darn good. Early CDs in the 80s, abysmal. And by the time they figured out how to master CDs to sound as good as the original vinyl, we were already into a download culture, and it didn't matter and nobody cared. And why would I buy a CD? I can make my own CD.
Vinyl itself, I think, to most people and most people's ears, has a warmer sound to it. It sounds more natural, I think, probably because it's coming off a physical thing, from a physical needle to an electrical impulse that goes to the speakers that, you know, that comes out and hits your ears. Whereas with the digital sound, it's you know, it's a cleaned up sound, you know, and I think the imperfections of that sound, it's more pleasing to me.
I don't think it's necessarily inherent to the format that it sounds better. It's inherent to the intent.
Funny, one of our customers, he's into Lin. I mean, high-end audio stuff, isn't it? Spent thousands doing it up. And he's always said to me, why don't you come round and have a listen? I've never gone round, but he'd asked someone else, and I think he took him round and he put on Dark Side of the Moon. And the fella listened to it, and when I saw him again, I said, what did you think of that? And he said, I couldn't tell the difference.
Vinyl's warmer, fuller sound comes from many factors, but it's largely due to its analog nature. Before these albums can be released, they have to go through additional processing to ensure that they sound good. This is all the hard work of the mastering engineers and vinyl cutters. These are the people that give vinyl that magical sound.
A mastering engineer is a person skilled in the practice of taking audio that has been previously mixed in either the analog or digital domain, as mono, stereo, or multi-channel formats, and preparing it for use in distribution, whether by physical media, such as vinyl. Mastering the vinyl is the process of creating a separate master that can be cut into a vinyl record without added unwanted distortion. It consists of a mono stereo image up to 150 Hz, a tamed high-end, and, if needed, a track listing that is consistent with the frequency limitations of record cutting.
I've always loved vinyl records as someone that grew up playing in bands since the time I was 14 years old. I always just felt this attraction to vinyl, and my start in music kind of came up through the punk rock scene. Later on in my life, as I started recording bands, basically out of necessity, because I was always in bands that could never afford to record, I was with a friend that was getting some lacquers cut. And long story short, I walked into the studio and I met Richard Simpson, who became my mentor, and I saw my first lacquer get cut, and it sort of changed the game for me. I grew up listening to vinyl records. My parents were music fans, especially when I was younger, and that sort of got me started. I was obsessed with music from an early age. I remember from the time I was in second grade on, all my extra money went to buying 45s, LPs, and cassettes. I became obsessed with heavy metal until the transition between 6th and 7th grade, and I heard punk rock for the first time. That kind of changed my life. I think when I met Richard, when I sat in on the session, we just hit it off, and he was really gracious, and he allowed me to stand up, get close to the lathe. He told me everything he was doing, and I remember being really surprised. I'm like, wow, there's no barriers here. He's totally he appreciates the fact that I'm interested in this.
My name is Richard Simpson. I'm a recording engineer / mastering engineer for pretty much completely with vinyl these days. I grew up on Long Island, out in a town called Hicksville, which is about 30 miles out of the city. My father was the head engineer at RCA in New York. So he would come home and he'd bring records home that he was working on. My era, when I first was coming up with music, was more of the Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, the swing kind of era. I happened to be somebody who really, I liked to dance from a kid on up, and the music just always had an interest to me. I was in the Air Force for 4 years. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to art school for like a couple of semesters, and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So I went into the service, spent 4 years in the Air Force, and when I got out, during that time I got married and I had one child. We came back to New York City. It helped to have my father be one of the head guys at RCA. So he got me an interview and I got on, and I started off at the bottom, like quality testing, listening for defects. And then the next step was to check the work of the vinyl mastering engineers. They'd come in the morning and they have a rack, we called it, of 12 albums or more that they had to cut during the daytime. After they pressed a few thousand records, they had to come back and have a new master lacquer made. And at that time, the engineer would cut a 1-minute section of the music on the outside, which allowed me to play. Because masters are cut on a 14-inch disc. The music starts at 12, so there's a couple of inches for making a test cut. They'd cut a 1-minute test, and then I'd compare that. We'd keep a production card, which would show in the first minute we had peaks of +2. So I'd play that, and if we were only getting 0, I'd go back and say, hey, we got to raise the level up to match what's out there, what people are buying. We don't want to put a different record out and have it sound lower or louder. I started in 1966. The early years was a lot of big artists. They were on RCA. So one of my first groups I worked with was the Guess Who, and then the Monkees, and well, Elvis was always coming up, and Lou Reed, and David Bowie. They were my first exposure cutting records. So I was involved in cutting a lot of those. But it was a lot of fun. I never considered what I do work. It's always been, fun. Well, RCA was cranking along, and I was in New York, and they were opening up a new room in Hollywood. So my boss at the time asked me if I would be interested in transferring. So at that time, it seemed like California was the place to go. So I jumped at it. I said, yeah, sure. In the Hollywood studios, it was a little bit different. It was more relaxed. In New York, it was more of a suit and tie thing, and there was certain things you could do and you couldn't do, and it was just more relaxed. We worked more hours, and to my surprise, RCA decided to close. And at the time, I think they were following suit what the CBS records did. It was kind of a shock. We're all sitting there working, and then we're told, a month from now, it's no longer going to be in existence. First, I tried to go out and get a loan and buy a new system. The people who bought the studio, they bought the new lathe that I was working on. So we had the old lathe that I first started cutting on when I came out here. And it was sitting in the room idle, wasn't being used. So I went to my boss at the time and said, hey, can I buy this system? And he kind of, looked at me and said, yeah, it's not going anyplace. The new people aren't interested in that. They pretty much almost gave it to me. I think I paid like $10,000 for the whole thing, including tape machine, monitors, equalizers, some amps, the Macintosh amps that are probably worth that much alone. When we closed down the Reference Point, I moved into Hollywood, into a pressing plant. It was a place called Koralik Engineering Manufacturing. Then there was a big boom from there. I mean, it was so much fun. This Macola Records was a pressing plant, and really they blew up. They didn't know how to handle, you know, hit after hit was coming in there. It was just one hit group after another. And I remember my first rap artist, Ice-T, and at that time, I didn't know who Ice-T really was. He'd come in and start talking, and I say, what is this? Because he'd talk exactly the way he'd rap. It was just the rhythm and the flow, and it was, you know, and that was really different. And that was my first introduction to pretty much hip-hop and rap. And he'd come in on a weekly basis, and I cut a dub from the music, and then he'd go out and do the live show playing the, what we call a dub. And a lot of my work was doing that kind of stuff. Cutting with DJs, cutting dubs, and mastering from the hip-hop and the dance and electronic music. I was busy, and it was a lot of fun.
Richard's clientele heavily relied on West Coast hip-hop, house music, electronic music, and the punk rock and indie bands that were still cutting records, because major labels weren't cutting records at all then. So I got to be involved in a lot of cool records, and it was always fun to see, you know, DJs coming in, you know, like hours before a show, and we're cutting dub plates for their show. And, you know, Richard cut all the local hip-hop stuff, everything from Alcoholics to, and back in the 80s, he cut all the Ghetto Boy stuff, Kool Keith, first NWA EP, like all this legendary hip-hop stuff that I loved. Being a mastering engineer, the only thing I can compare it to, and I joke with a few friends of mine in the industry, and I've said it before, but I feel like the kid that wanted to be an astronaut that got to be. I mean, this is a dream job. We sit here and we listen to amazing music all day and help the artist push that last bit, you know, over the finish line.
With around 1,400 independent vinyl stores in America alone, you can get your hands on your favourite records with relative ease. Thanks to its ever-growing popularity, Vinyl Mania has spread worldwide, even in corners of the world you might not expect.
I'm Pilak Bhatt, and I'm from Mumbai, and we have a small record shop called Music Circle in Mumbai. I was fascinated by music right from my childhood because my parents were very much into music. They were music lovers and would often attend concerts by giants like Ravi Shankar, Ali Akbar Khan. My uncle, he had a great collection of music. He was a great record collector. You can say music is in my blood. I've been in this business for the last 15 years. You know, when the CDs came, a lot of people started giving away their vinyls. So I thought, okay, this is a good time actually, because I knew that vinyl sound is much better than the CD sound. So I thought this is a good time to, you know, collect vinyls. So that time I was not thinking of business as such, but I, you know, being passionate about music, I wanted to have the vinyls, you know. So I collected a lot of vinyls during that time. Naturally, then it grew over the years, and today I have a huge collection of vinyls, as you can see. There was a record store called Rhythm House in Mumbai. That was the biggest in Mumbai. And my main reason of entering into this vinyl thing is because I love the vinyl sound. It is an analog sound. It is a very pure, natural, warm sound. And compared to CDs and MP3s, which are, you know, kind of a compromised formats. Younger days, I used to listen to a lot of Beatles, and then over the years, my taste changed a little bit. Then I got into groups like Santana, Pink Floyd, Dire Straits, all the classic rock groups, you know. And when you listen to these guys, you know, they have a profound influence on you because they change your life forever, you know. Previously, I was working with my brother in the metals business, and when I turned 50, I thought I must do what I love to do. I must get involved into the business of what I really like to do. You know, every record has a little story behind it, you know. There are a lot of sentiments, emotions also attached to buying records. And those records I will never sell because those are like special to me and gifted by someone to me. So my philosophy for music is you just don't stick to one genre. Be open-minded and listen to all kinds of music. There is African music, there is Arabic music, there is Latin music to be discovered. So this is my advice to the youth also. Don't just stick to one kind of music. Listen to music with open mind. Basically, I'm in this music business because of my passion. Not because of money or not because of the number of records or I want to touch 1 lakh figure or anything. I'm basically a very passionate music lover. That's how I'm in this business. For whom the music is not just about selling records, but it is a way of life. Music is my life. So I'll always be associated with music.
To so many people, record collecting has become something of a lifestyle rather than just a hobby. But what are these records we're dying to get our hands on? The term rare records might conjure up images of prehistoric or obscure albums that feel almost unobtainable to the average listener. But there are many factors that go into making a record rare. And some of them are not as far out as you might imagine.
We've had rare things like the Beatles Butcher's cover. We've had, rare jazz things.
I have some good stories of finding rare records.
Found all kinds of things. People, have been selling us stuff back for 30 years and you never know what's coming in and what it is. And
the rarest record, we've had a few, but I guess the most rare record is we had a 45, a Motley Crue Girls, Girls, Girls 45 that was a promo edition that was only given out at their kickoff of that tour in Las Vegas. That show, they passed out 1,000 of them.
I bought, I think it was Bon Jovi. I bought a 45. My mom let me buy a 45 at a record store in Decatur, Illinois, where I was when I was young, and so I was old enough where vinyl was still kind of phasing out.
Rarity is one of those odd things because a rare record to somebody is like, oh my God, I found this Debbie Gibson record that I've never found before. And to somebody that's a really rare thing. The market's always changing and the rarity of things always changes as well.
I saw this album come up as The Wailers. It's like definitely not Bob Marley and The Wailers. And I actually went past it at first and then I backed up and there was this beautiful, brand new, not wrapped, but it was a brand new copy.
That was one of those shockers. I mean, we're very, very well versed in what most everything is valued at, and we do know like regular high dollar records and things, what to look for. That was probably one of the big surprises because we knew it was worth something, but it wasn't very obvious in the beginning.
A record's only really worth what someone will pay for it anyway. When it's already well sticking it down for £1,500, but how many people are actually getting £1,500? I mean, I've had a couple of Please Please Me's black and gold, which have had decent prices for, but they're rare. You don't see them that often. They don't come in that often.
Nobody's ever seen this, but this is worth $100. They have to believe us, right?
Most of the rare records that I've found, I mostly got here.
The more interesting rare records that I've come across are the ones that weren't rare out of my own collection that I came to be rare later on.
In Japan, they had these things called the 8-bands, which are like these little tiny records, and the vinyls were about the size of like the vinyl label. And they had like tiny mini like record players to play them on. Of course, the sound wasn't great, but they were kind of cute when you looked at them. But I think the Foo Fighters, and I know that the White Stripes actually released like rare 8-bands, and they sold them at shows and things like that. But they're crazy, but there's something about them that's just cool.
I think the rarest record I have, someone actually gave to me, which is kind of weird. At the time, the record it became valuable since they gave it to me. At the time, it was just like, here's this record I made.
Basically, I had started my collection so early, they were still $2 before my employee discount, and you just buy up whatever. It didn't matter if you knew what it was. And then years later, I'm like, oh, that's worth $200.
I know my parents personally, they've been a lot more interested in finding records for us. And so my mom's she's a big garage sale person. She goes like every week, and so every time she goes out, she's always looking for records for us.
I just started flipping through the records anyway, and I found John Carpenter Halloween soundtrack on vinyl. And that one, I looked it up, and it was, I mean, of course, the going rate for a record is what people will pay, but it looked like what I found it was a $300 record for 99 cents, so that was a pretty good deal.
Signed originals of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band have gone for a whopping $290K price tag. It's also said that Ringo Starr's own copy of the first ever pressing of the Beatles' White Album is worth somewhere around $700,000. But that's nothing compared to the jaw-dropping $2 million price tag on Wu-Tang Clan's album Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, which was supposedly only pressed to vinyl once. This copy was so prestigious that upon purchase the buyer was forbidden from selling this copy for an 88-year time period.
Val, the founder and original owner, worked at Capitol Records when the Beatles came out and was called in on her day off to strip Butcher covers. So, I mean, that's the big one, and everyone always asks, why didn't you snag one of those? They're worth a fortune.
This one's a Sun Ra record that is handmade by cutting up shower curtains, so they're just one of a kind.
If you're aware of it, but there's something called Record Store Day, and Record Store Day, actually the third Record Store Day is this Saturday, so we're preparing for it. There's boxes and boxes of unreleased tracks in here that we're preparing for. And what they did was they came out, the records that come out usually in limited presses.
But the big one is in April every year, and it's to support indie record shops, and they would do these special releases only for that day. They might reissue them later, but not with the special packaging or the special color, or it might be only for that day and never be reissued.
And they make it exclusive to independent record stores, which makes it super cool because then people are they want to drive traffic back into record stores and keep those places around.
After the war, sort of 1947, my nan's brother came out of the Air Force and bought this shop to, at the time, I think it sold bits of everything. We used to sell fancy goods, cigarettes, things like that. 1950, he found another shop, sort of not far away. His wife sort of liked this other building, so my nan took it on in 1950, and then sort of 1951, she bought it off him for 400 and something quid, with all the stock, a lot of which was, as I say, there were strange fancy goods and that, but we also used to sell 78s. My mother started working here, I think that she sold her first record when she was 13. I've always been in a record shop because I was actually born above the one in Old Swan in 1961. So I was always around records. I used to come and help me nan from about 1980. I used to drop in after work because I was actually a milkman for a very short while. So I'd get up at 4 in the morning, go and do a bit of, I wasn't actually driving the thing, but I was helping. And then after there, because it was only around the corner, I'd come and have a cup of tea with me nan. And then I just started helping out. So I've sort of been here ever since. It's very annoying when they come in and tell you where I've just bought this from such and such a place. Do you like it? Well, yeah, people are nice. I mean, we've got loads of regular customers and they're all really nice people, you know. So yeah, wouldn't change it for the world.
The undeniable sound of vinyl has proven itself many times over, but there's also a visual appeal. For many fans and collectors alike, the artwork has sealed its own place within the vinyl phenomenon.
You look at the cover and you look at the photos and the artwork that they did.
The record covers are bigger, like a 12 by 12 thing.
The image is big, you can read it, it's a good thing.
I like the idea of being able to read all the technical stuff. Who is the engineer? Who are the players who are on the record? All that, you get all that with your vinyl.
The artwork's large, and sometimes they have gatefold sleeves that you can open and there's more artwork inside. There's lyrics printed on the inner sleeve or whatever.
And the great artwork, it really is a big part of the listening process. It's like people didn't make records and just throw any old image up. There's a reason why they did it. So you get this experience.
For a designer, it can be really frustrating because, you know, as any artist would say, you put all this effort into this image and this artwork. And of course, vinyl is like the ultimate because you've got the big artwork, you can really see what's going on. But then of course CDs came out and you're like opening the booklet and you're like, okay, this is okay, I can kind of deal with this, I can still just about see it. And then now it's like we're reduced to like a thumbnail on like Spotify. You're looking at it like, what is that, you know? So it's a shame really that the artwork isn't as prominent, you know, because there just isn't the size.
Visually, records have always drawn to the cover art. In the 50s, when it was instrumental records, you know, they would sometimes, or classical records, they would take paintings, you know, like, and you know, there's some Jackie Gleason records that have a Salvador Dali cover, you know, so, and Andy Warhol was a cover artist and did a lot of artists for jazz records as well.
I mean, I think truthfully, some people might not even have a turntable, but they buy records because they want the artwork, they want the lyrics, they want the poster, you know, hanging up.
Sometimes I'll take the artwork out of the albums, and you can't do that with a computer, so I'll take, like I have this Purple Rain record that's got this great poster of Prince and the Revolution, and I'll put that up behind me. Or
I remember this amazing book that my mum and dad had that I was just completely obsessed with. I would just like open it up, read it like every day. It was by like Storm Thorgerson, who designed a lot of the album covers, and it was just like it was just an archive, like a giant collection of all these classic covers on vinyl, and it was vinyl size, and it was incredible. I just remember going through it, you know, reading it, rereading it, looking at the notes. It just blew my mind.
And I remember getting Kiss Alive 2 as well. I'd never heard them before though. Wow. I mean, open the cover and explosions and everything on the inner sleeve. Fantastic.
Captain Beefheart's Trout Mask replica and see the cover with the crazy fish head and like, what the hell is this? And I just bought it. And so I got into a lot of music because I just took a risk on it based on the album art.
The covers are worth more than the record. A lot of times, like, this is a pretty special jazz record.
Johnny Hallyday, Rêve et Amour, Dream and Love, but it's fantastic because it's kind of really kitchen over the top, but it has all these little, Johnny is wearing all these little medallions. We've got Marlon Brando, we've got Little Richard as the king.
When they put the name of the band on the bottom of the album, so when you're flicking through, you miss it, you don't know who it is. And some of these strange bands, they get this design of their name. Can you read it? Crazy, isn't it? I mean, it's funny. I always thought one of the worst album covers in the world was Love Beats by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. You've got the three of them standing on the beach. I mean, it's about as far from prog as you can get, and it's just would it have sold better if I had the better cover? Possibly. Who knows?
I remember my mum and dad's records. We would have two copies of everything. One was mum's, one was dad's. And dad's was always in really good condition, and mum's was always like really like covered in like burn holes and ash, and it was just, you know, and sort of unknown sort of brown stains that just appeared out of nowhere. But then dad's would be pristine, but mum's just looked like she got out of the rubbish or something.
I have found records. I've opened up records, and I'll open and seeds come rolling out. I only can guess that it's just great because maybe it's something about rolling it up against a right angle or something like that. I have to ask my parents. Because one of the records I'm talking about, it was their record, so I don't know if they'd give me a truthful answer now. Time changes people, but...
We've had album covers in, and you've sort of opened them up, and there's burn marks and all sorts, and, you know, even LPs with burn marks on, so they've obviously been smoking something at the time.
Maybe you're already stoned and you're looking at that inside cover where all that great artwork is, and you're just having this totally like mind.
Maybe you're already stoned and you're looking at that inside cover where all that great artwork is, and you're just having this totally like mind-blowing experience.
Totally like mind-blowing experience.
Maybe you're already stoned and you're looking at that inside cover where all that great artwork is, and you're just having this totally like mind-blowing experience.
My name is Shane Blakely. I'm from Saginaw, Michigan originally, and I've been Val's go-to guy for almost 20 years. Basically, I worked at a different music store in Michigan before I moved, a CD store, and at the time, High Fidelity was new and not nearly as creepy as it is now. And I saw John Cusack in that and decided that I had to kind of be that guy and own my own record store in Chicago. Things worked out in such a way that I was able to move here and attempt to do that. I went to open a bank account in Logan Square, and my banker was like, "Oh, you gotta go meet my friend Val." And she sent me from there to Oak Park to meet Val, who was intimidating as hell right off the get-go, but gave her my very formal resume. She demanded that I return it handwritten in my own words with profanity, and then called me back for part-time work shortly after. That same day, 2 different people put in their 2 weeks notice. I went full-time on my first day, and then I was the sole employee from 2006 on. We're one of the few record stores that have been around through the peaks and valleys of the industry in general, where when Val opened up, it was in the glory years, and her favorite quote was that on any given week, from all the teenagers in the neighborhood, she got every dollar except for maybe a Lita pot and a pair of jeans. That was what the universe was. That's where you spent your money. That was the entertainment industry. Most of the records that we bring in are brought to us. You know, customers come in every single day to, you know, do you buy records? Do you know, take in donations? Do you like trade-ins? Things like that. Which is, you know, that makes up the bulk of it. We also order new product from several different places. Time was way before my era, in my parents' era, and throughout Val's legacy. That was the thing, is you didn't get to, you know, get on Zoom or whatever and play Call of Duty with your friends. Somebody bought the new Led Zeppelin album. You met in that person's basement. You maybe got high if you had cool parents or parents that were oblivious, and you listened to that album front to back, examined all of the liner notes, and you argued with the band themselves over the track placement. You know, this should have been on, you know, if this was on side A, this would have been perfect. But, you know, as a result, you know, so it's a communal experience, not only with your friends, but with the record itself, with the band. I have a lot of favorite parts of the vinyl business. Obviously, I've been doing this a long time, but it is always going to be interacting with the customers and talking music. I hope the future for vinyl records looks sunshiny, because obviously I've been here a long time and I have no hope of leaving. I don't know what I would do otherwise. So yeah, keep it up, folks.
You know, DJs and producers were already collecting and spinning funk, jazz, soul by the late 90s. You know, I thought, okay, well, you know, I had 10,000 records in my house already. For 40 years, 50 years, you know, that was the medium how people listen to music. I mean, can you imagine if there were no records? How would people be listening to music, you know? For me, that was the first thing that I touched. Now we've been through tape. I mean, you know, we survived the tapes and the CDs and the DAT machines and all that kind of digital now. But vinyl, you know, it's still around. I think, you know, in my opinion, it's that hard artifact, you know, that, you know, you feel and you smell and you have in your living room, you know. It's something that it kind of forces you to listen to the music, every track. You don't just skip through them. I was just at a coffee shop, you know, 5 minutes before I saw you, you know, and the guy was saying, you know, I really miss my record collection back home. And you never hear that with CDs, you know. It's always records, right? For me, digging was just, it's the concept of trying to find unknown tracks, you know, that other people don't have. Producers always want to be sampling, and DJs want to be playing tracks that other guys don't. That's how you differentiate yourself, right? So we have a digging station in Ohio, right, where it's managed by my business partner, Mazi, and his staff, and we dig every day, you know. Because of technology, in competition. I can't be traveling to every city anymore. So we decided that, look, we're going to concentrate in one area that we did well, and that's Ohio. And so we've been concentrating, probably for 20 years now, we've been digging out Ohio. But I've always kind of kept to the notion that my personal records are separate than my business records. I went on a buying trip for 6 months to the States looking for records for the shop only. So we go out there, but because the US, America is so segregated and so polarized, it's really, really dangerous to go to certain neighborhoods if you're a minority. And we're a minority-owned business, so we get to see people's homes and how they collected these things for 40 years. How did you come up with 3,000 records in your house, from the 60s? Why did you buy this record? There's a lot of historical records out there, not just the music, but there's literature records, there's political records, things like that. So we're really interested in that kind of stuff too. 10 years ago was pretty scary. I think that's one of the reasons why Record Store Day started in April, right? Because April and maybe October, November is the slowest part of the year. So, so many record stores are going out of business. You got a trendy, trend is probably the worst thing you can have for a retail store. You never want to be trendy, right? Because there's always an ups and down. You always want to be consistent, and don't try to sell as many hamburgers like McDonald's does. That's not, just because you sell 1 million hamburgers doesn't mean you're the best, right? It's not the best quality. Try to look for quality. I think that's how we have to keep going and to survive.
Now, before anything can be reborn, sadly, it has to fade away first. Was Sony's decision to stop the production of vinyl back in 1989 really to blame for the fall of the record? Or was it just a natural progression of the ongoing saga of home entertainment and audio consumerism? Much like when grunge killed hair metal from one disc to another, it was about to be proven that even vinyl was replaceable.
Vinyl was really the only thing there was for a long time, and then I'm gonna guess, I think in the late 80s, but from my experience it was maybe about 88, 89, 90, CDs started coming along.
In the 90s, kids, I think with the advent of the CD, and like I said, they'd open the door and go, oh man, it's only old man music,
Like the late 80s, I remember reading articles and I was in school and I remember saying like the fall of record stores.
Everyone dumped their vinyl and started buying CDs.
Philips announced the next best thing to live music, compact disc. Compact disc, another sensation.
It was supposed to be the best. They're indestructible and they're super clean and they'll never wear out.
Record sales declined at major chain stores, back in mid-80s to early 90s, mostly because the chain stores gave up on it.
I never dumped my vinyl off. I just added CDs to my collection.
A lot of labels weren't even releasing vinyl anymore.
CDs and actually cassettes took over popularity about 1985 or so. And people forget that there was a small window from about 85 to 87. The cassette was actually the biggest format because people had boom boxes, they played them in their car.
You really feel the music with the Sony Walkman.
The Sony Walkman is a tiny stereo cassette player with truly incredible sound.
You really feel the music, you really feel it. You really feel the music.
Put on a Walkman and see the world in a whole new light.
Sony Walkman.
The Walkman from Sony, the one and only.
Well, about 95, it was just about dead. I mean, that's why you pay £100 plus for Oasis's first album if you find an original, because nobody bought it, did they?
It's squeezed out because of the profitability at the major chains. It's like, well, we make more money in less space off of these CDs than we do off of records.
I'm not sure if there was a time when bands just never made vinyl. It was only CDs and cassettes. There might have been some vinyl still produced. A large part of the 90s, a large chunk of the 90s and early mid-2000s seems like the only thing people did were CDs. For a while there were CDs and cassettes because cassette was still a viable form, but then CDs just completely took over, and you were hard pressed, for lack of a better word, you were hard pressed to find vinyl.
Vinyl was kind of in that sort of the dark ages of the 90s where CDs had sort of taken over.
Some purists felt like listening to music on CD was like cheating on their beloved vinyl, and the compact disc's newfound high fidelity was simply sonic infidelity.
Music stores across Australia are drastically overstocked with hundreds of great compact discs from the world's finest artists at very special low prices.
Streaming music. I can't play a record in my car. You know, I can play CDs, and I stream. I have Spotify. A lot of times I want to hear something before I buy it, you know, and so I'm going to listen to it that way before I spend, you know, $30 on a record. So I have no problems with that being the go-to. What I don't like about it is the lack of money that the artists get from it. Of course, the sound quality, I can tell a huge difference, but my ear is trained to at this point, and that's what people are learning or finding out.
You know, people like to think that there's other record stores around here. Are we in direct competition? We're all friends. We're in competition with Amazon. We're in competition with video games more than anything. You look at any kind of new video game that takes like 50 hours to complete, if you're good, well, that used to be spent, you know, analyzing the liner notes of a Led Zeppelin record.
Well, this is an interesting time to be interviewed about this because as of last Friday, one of two companies that created the vinyl blanks that we use to cut masters, there were two companies, it was Apollo Transco in Banning, California, and MDC in Japan. Apollo supplied 80% of the lacquer blanks to the world, and they were wiped out Thursday and early Friday in a devastating fire. They are completely gone. So this is an odd time to be doing this because right now a lot of us in this industry are unsure what's going to happen. So there may be shortages in the industry. There may be people that have a really hard time getting their records cut moving forward for a little while until another company steps up to fill the void to start making blank lacquers, which is an extremely difficult process.
The biggest issue that concerns me is the thing that I already brought up, which is that the production sort of problems have been a thing, and I worry that, you know, people want to come in here and get something, and if we don't have it, you know, customers don't understand. They don't care about production issues. They don't think about that kind of stuff. I mean, some people do, but generally, if you go, like if I go to the grocery store and they don't have bread, I'm not gonna like ask them why they don't. I'm just gonna like walk out and be like annoyed. Do you know what I mean? And that's what I think would happen here too. You know, some people might ask, but generally people are gonna be like, why doesn't anybody have this? Like, it's super annoying. And I could see people like just being like, you know what, I'm just gonna like stream this stuff. But again, like I said, we're out of a couple things, but we got all this other stuff. So I don't know. I don't really see any end to it soon. Right now, it's just, you know, like I said, each year it keeps going up. So.
In a consumerist world where fans have to have lots of everything, a world with fads, trends, and a love for toys, it was inevitable that vinyl would return. MRC's data confirms that as of the year 2020, vinyl attributed to 27% of album sales in the US alone. And as for the UK, vinyl sales have been at their highest since the early 90s. It's not only a great time for music lovers, it's a great time for up-and-coming artists and bands who, until now, saw the idea of having their own music released on vinyl as nothing more than a pipe dream, reserved for high flyers on major labels. With the rise of the internet and social media, vinyl fans and collectors from all over the world can finally be brought together to truly realise their love for the medium.
I hate to call it a resurgence because for me it never went away.
It never went away. That's the first thing. It never actually went away. It just slowed down.
Vinyl, it's a strange arc. The stories that they were writing back in the 90s were, oh, vinyl's dead, when are they going to stop making vinyl? Here we are 25 years later from when they were writing those stories. At that time, vinyl wasn't dying. It was dying out at the major chain stores like the Music Lands. And
people love anything that's like retro. And I think that kind of vintage retro thing is really popular and it's trendy. And I think that's helped to accelerate, like, you know, the rise of vinyl again.
No one really cared about CDs. CDs were cool because you could put a bunch in an envelope and take them in your car and they were portable. But they weren't, there was nothing sexy about them. No one's excited about the 3,000 CDs they have on a rack in their living room. No one cares about that.
Streaming, downloading, and all of that really just murdered the CD and made the record look all the more attractive. And it largely with bragging rights. And of course the sound was better because of course it was better.
As the CD market crashed, that changed for vinyl. But the vinyl sales were always going strong. There were always people that were looking for vinyl. It just wasn't a story that was talked about.
In the mid-2000s, it slowly started picking back up.
I don't feel vinyl is a fad that's going away. I think it's the last tangible product that's going to make any sense.
It was just like a slow build back up. And then probably maybe 2009, 2010, it really, the boom really started.
I hope that vinyl does stay around for a long time, not because I have a record store, but really because there's something really magical about records.
If you would have asked me like 10 years ago, like how long do you think this is gonna last? I don't know that I would have said, yeah, in 2020 we're still going to be selling more than we did the previous year, but we are.
When I was telling somebody that I was considering starting a vinyl pressing plant, they were kind of like, well, why would somebody purchase vinyl? And I was like, well, you know, to physically own your music. And they're like, you know, because when I grew up, fans of music, and I've been a radio DJ since I was in high school, and so I've always been associated with music. It was a big deal when you said, yeah, I own that record. Or, you know, I bought that record when it came out. Or I remember the day I bought those 3 records, right? Like, that's a big thing.
Yeah, vinyl revival's no joke. I mean, it's got its own, like, Wikipedia link. It's, like, registered, like, as a real phenomenon.
There's always fear of formats and format changes as to what's going to change. When cassettes came out, people were concerned that, you know, there were the stickers that home taping is killing the music business and, you know, downloading is killing the music business. But there are people that like to buy music and like to physically own music.
No one's going to come out with another physical format that people are going to appreciate as much as vinyl. So vinyl is a analog reproduction of your record, and I think there's something that's just sexy about that people love.
With vinyl, you do get the full experience. I mean, as a kid, I grew up with vinyl not because it was my era. I was from like the tape and CD era, but it's all my parents had. But when you open it up and, you know, you get the gatefold and you see, like, you know, all the images and the liner notes, and then you take the vinyl out and you know, blow the dust off and put it on. It's like an experience.
But I think it's going to be a while before it goes away. I really do. And it's an investment.
There will always be people that want to physically own music. I think it's because, you know, it gives you a connection to the artist, to the musicians you love.
You know, if you had told me that we would outlast like Tower Records and Virgin Records, and I would never have believed it.
I mean, the last 5 years, there's probably been at least 8 new plants, new operations that have opened up. And some of them doing a really good job.
We're dealing with local independent bands. I can tell you 15 years ago, local independent bands were pressing vinyl in this town. So to me, 15 years from now, local independent bands and labels are still going to be pressing vinyl in this town.
I don't see people in their 40s and 50s and 60s and beyond buying records. I see a lot of young people buying records. They make really affordable record players now that are less than $100. So I think that a new generation of people are buying records, and I think that it could hopefully last a really long time if they are excited about buying records.
I hope it grows and grows and grows and keeps going, because I think it's nice for people to have options. I think it's a shame that a format that's just older has to disappear and people can go, well, no, you can't listen to this anymore. So it's nice to have the option. It's nice that people have spoken up and they've said, hey, we love vinyl, you know, bring it back. And it's back, so.
Got a lovely little lad, I don't know, he must be about 12, 13, comes in with his dad, he loves Queen, he's been buying all my Queen stuff.
A younger generation, you know, the difference between that era in the 90s, kids used to come in, they'd open the door and they'd go, oh man, it's just records, and walk right back out. Nowadays, kids open the door and go, oh man, it's only records, it's so cool.
The minute people stop coming in here asking us questions at Christmas of what kind of turntable they need to buy their significant other or their child or whatever for Christmas, then that's when we know it's going away. And so far that hasn't happened.
So there it is, vinyl in a nutshell. We've talked to the fans, the collectors and the experts, and we're not convinced that our beloved LP will be going anywhere anytime soon. As vinyl sales continue to rise, the music plays on. Of course, audio technology is a never-ending, ever-evolving concept that's not likely to slow down anytime soon. But some of us, however, just can't imagine a world without records. And why should we? As long as the jukebox has life in it, our vinyl records will be spinning for a very, very long time.